I still remember the sound of rain that night. The city lights shimmered through the water on my window, soft and gold, like the world itself was holding its breath. I had just moved back to the city after 3 years away, telling myself it was for work, but deep down I knew I was chasing something else. Or maybe someone else. His name still lived quietly somewhere inside me. You know how some memories refuse to fade, no matter how far you run. Ours wasn't loud or dramatic. It just ended one day. Life happened, pride took over, and silence grew between us like a wall that neither of us wanted to climb. But the truth was, I never stopped feeling him everywhere. In the coffee shop we used to sit in the smell of fresh rain on the streets. Even in the playlist I swore I'd deleted. When I saw him again, it wasn't planned. It never is, right? It was a Friday evening. I was late to meet a friend at a restaurant downtown. I rushed in, and there he was, sitting by the window, a half-empty glass in front of him, and that same quiet focus in his eyes. He looked up, and for a moment, the noise around us just disappeared. Time didn't stop, but it slowed enough for me to remember everything. His voice, his laugh, the way he used to say my name like it was a secret. He smiled first. That soft, almost nervous smile that always meant he was thinking too much. I froze, holding my breath, heart thundering. Then he stood up. And that's when I knew this wasn't over. It never had been. He said my name quietly, like it might break if he spoke it too loud. And then he laughed. Of all the places in this city, I laughed too, though my chest felt tight. We talked. Awkwardly at first, then easily, like no time had passed. We both tried not to mention the years between us, but the silence that used to live there was gone now, replaced by something warmer. He offered to walk me home, like he used to. I almost said no, but something inside whispered, let him. The streets were quiet that night. Just the sound of our shoes and the echo of old memories between us. We talked about work, the city, little things, but beneath it all, there was a current neither of us could ignore. The unspoken question of whether this was a coincidence or something else. At my door, he hesitated. The air between us was thick with everything we didn't say. I could see it in his eyes, the apology, the longing, the hesitation. I missed you, he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rehearsed. It was honest. And I think that's why it hit so hard. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, feeling every piece of my heart wake up again. Then I smiled. You still remember how to say that? He laughed softly, shaking his head. I never forgot. When he left, I stood at my door for a long time, trying to breathe. The city around me buzzed with life, but inside, it felt like everything had gone quiet again. The kind of quiet that only happens before something beautiful begins. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. Every word, every look, every memory. And deep down, I knew, fate had just opened the door I thought was closed forever. It started with coffee. Always coffee. That first morning after he came back, the city still half asleep, I found him at the small cafe down the street where we used to spend Sundays. He was sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a steaming cup, sunlight spilling across his face like it remembered him too. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled that same soft smile that once made my whole world quiet. I stood there, frozen, caught between the woman I had become and the one who still ached for him. He didn't rush to speak, and neither did I. We just looked at each other for a while, like silence was safer than words. Then finally he said, "You still take yours with 2 sugars." It wasn't a question. It was memory. I nodded, and he slid a cup toward me without asking. That small gesture broke something open. We sat for hours, talking about everything and nothing. The jobs we left, the dreams that didn't last, the people who came and went. His voice still had that warmth that made every word sound like a promise. He told me he'd moved back to the city a few months ago, but he hadn't called because he didn't know if I'd want to hear from him. I wanted to lie, to say I'd moved on easily, but when I looked into his eyes, every lie crumbled. "You were always the one who stayed in my head," I said softly. He reached across the table, fingers brushing mine just enough to make my heart forget how to beat properly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every second of that cafe moment. His laughter, his voice saying my name like it still belonged to him. I thought about how different we were now, older, more guarded, less naive. But somehow, the connection still pulsed between us, quiet but alive. Over the next few days, it became a rhythm. We started meeting again. Once at the park, then at a bookstore, then at the rooftop where we used to watch the city lights. It didn't feel like starting over. It felt like remembering. Every conversation peeled back another layer of distance until I realized I was smiling again, the kind of smile I hadn't worn in years. He asked me one evening, "Do you ever think we ended too soon?" The way he said it, soft, almost scared, made my chest ache. I looked out at the skyline, the city glowing beneath us, and whispered, "I think we stopped too early, not ended." He smiled then, slow and knowing, like maybe that was enough hope for him to stay. There was a moment, quiet and delicate, when he brushed a strand of hair from my face and said, "I missed you, more than I should have." I wanted to tell him I missed him too. I wanted to tell him I never stopped missing him. But the words got lost in the air between us, carried away by the hum of the city. That night walking home, I realized that some people never truly leave. They linger in your habits, in your playlists, in the way you look at the rain. And when they return, no matter how much time has passed, it's like they were never gone. The city felt smaller after that night. Everywhere I went, he was there somehow, in the smell of roasted coffee drifting from street corners, in the way the rain kissed the pavement, in every song that dared to whisper his name between chords. We had slipped back into each other's lives too easily, like we had been waiting for the right silence to fall. But the truth was, time doesn't heal everything. It just teaches you how to hide the ache better. We kept meeting. Late nights turned into quiet mornings. Sometimes we'd walk along the river, talking about nothing important. He'd tell me about his photography work, how he was finally creating again, how the city light made him feel alive. I'd tell him about my small apartment, the one filled with plants and unfinished poems. We were trying to fit the new versions of ourselves into the memory of what we used to be, and it wasn't easy. There were moments when I'd catch him looking at me like he still knew me. Not the person I showed the world, but the one who used to trace constellations on his skin when the world felt too heavy. And I'd look away, afraid of what that look still did to me. Because part of me still belonged to him, no matter how hard I tried to deny it. One evening, after dinner, we ended up at my place. The city outside hummed like a secret, lights flickering through the curtains. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, and said quietly, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we didn't walk away?" I didn't answer at first. I just watched the reflection of his face in the glass. Familiar, older, still heartbreakingly kind. I think we did what we thought we had to, I said finally. Back then, love wasn't enough. We were both trying to save ourselves. He nodded, but there was sadness in it. Maybe. Or maybe we just didn't fight hard enough. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I wanted to tell him that I'd tried to move on, that I'd let other men hold me but never touch the parts of me that still belonged to him. But before I could speak, he turned, closing the space between us in 2 slow steps. When his hand brushed my arm, everything inside me stilled. I didn't move, didn't breathe. His touch wasn't demanding, it was remembering. And that made it worse. Because in that touch, I felt everything we had been and everything we had lost. He whispered, "Tell me to stop." But I didn't. I couldn't. Because even though every rational part of me screamed that this was dangerous, the rest of me, the part that still dreamt of him on quiet nights, wanted to stay. He leaned in, and for a moment, the world felt suspended. His breath was warm against my skin, his voice barely a whisper. "I still love you, you know." And just like that, every wall I had built began to crumble. I stepped back, blinking away the tears that burned my eyes. "You can't say that, not after everything." "But it's true," he said, voice breaking slightly. "And I think you still love me too." I didn't answer. Instead, I turned toward the window, staring at the blur of city lights that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. He was right. I did still love him. But love wasn't supposed to feel like this. Half hope, half ache. That night, after he left, I sat in the dark for a long time. The city outside kept moving, but I stayed still. Because how do you fall out of love with someone who feels like home? How do you stop missing a heartbeat that once matched your own? Days passed like pages half-turned. We didn't speak much after that night. Not because we didn't want to, but because sometimes silence says what words can't. I buried myself in work, in errands, in anything that would keep my hands busy and my heart quiet. But he was everywhere. One afternoon, while I was leaving a cafe, I saw him across the street. He was holding his camera, capturing a moment between an old couple laughing over coffee. Something about it made me pause. The way he smiled behind that lens, the way he existed so fully in that fleeting instant, it was exactly what I'd always loved about him. He had a way of seeing beauty in ordinary things, in people who didn't even realize they were being seen. He noticed me before I could turn away. For a second, he just stared, then crossed the street, camera swinging at his side. "You're avoiding me," he said softly, not accusingly, just stating it. "I'm trying to protect myself," I replied. He nodded slowly. "From me. From what I still feel." The honesty hung between us, fragile and raw. He took a step closer, close enough for me to smell the faint trace of his cologne. "Maybe you shouldn't," he whispered. We stood there in the middle of the city, traffic rushing by, the world spinning, but for us, everything slowed. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. It was such a small gesture, but it undid me completely. "Come with me," he said. "Just for a few hours." I hesitated, but something in me, the part that still remembered how it felt to be loved by him, said yes. He took me to the pier at the edge of the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. We sat on the wooden boards, legs dangling above the water, not saying much. It felt like before. The world fading out, just us and the quiet rhythm of waves. After a long silence, he spoke. You know, I used to come here after we broke up. I'd sit right here and convince myself you were happy, that you'd moved on. He gave a sad laugh. I told myself that lie so many times it started to sound true. I turned to him, heart aching. I wasn't happy. I just got used to pretending. He looked at me then, really looked. And I saw it, all the love, the regret, the hope he'd been holding back. Without a word, he leaned closer, his hand trembling slightly as it found mine. I don't want to pretend anymore, he said. Not if it means losing this again. My breath caught. The air between us felt electric, alive. For the first time in years, the distance we'd built began to fade. I could feel the warmth of his skin, the steady beat of his pulse. I whispered, "Then don't." That was all it took. The walls that time had built between us crumbled. He kissed me, not like someone chasing nostalgia, but like a man coming home. It was deep, unhurried, familiar. Every touch carried 1,000 unsaid apologies, and every breath felt like forgiveness. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his chest. The city lights flickered behind us, the water glowed with the reflection of the setting sun, and for the first time, everything felt right again. He held me close, his voice low against my hair. Let's stop running from what we already know. Let's start again. And I realized then, it wasn't about rewriting our past. It was about continuing the story we never finished. The days that followed felt like a quiet sunrise after a long night. Nothing dramatic, no grand declarations, just small, beautiful moments that slowly rebuilt what we once lost. Morning walks, late-night talks, cooking together in the little apartment that used to echo with silence. He still left his coffee mugs half full. I still overwatered the plants. We were the same people, but softer now, scarred, wiser, and more careful with each other's hearts. Sometimes we would sit on the balcony and watch the city lights flicker. It's strange, I said one night, resting my head on his shoulder. How easy it feels again. He smiled. Maybe love doesn't disappear. Maybe it just waits for us to be ready again. There was something in the way he said it, gentle and certain, that made my chest ache. Because he was right. What we had wasn't something that time could erase. It was something that had to be rediscovered, patiently, piece by piece. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, I felt the weight of the past lifting. We didn't try to recreate what we had before. We built something new, something steadier, rooted in truth. One evening, he took me back to the pier. The same place where we had found our way back to each other. The air was cool, the sea calm, and the sky burned with 100 shades of pink and gold. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph, the first one he ever took of me years ago. My hair was a mess, my smile uneven, but he had always loved that picture. I kept this, he said, through everything. It reminded me that love isn't perfect. It's messy, unpredictable, but it's real. And it's ours. I looked at him, eyes stinging. So what now? He took my hand, his fingers tracing the inside of my palm like he was memorizing it. Now we stop being almost. We stopped being what-ifs. And then, with that same quiet certainty, he said the words I had waited years to hear. Stay. For good this time. I didn't need to think. I just nodded, smiling through tears. I was never really gone. He pulled me into his arms, and the world fell away again. The noise of the city, the years we had lost, all of it. It was just us, the way it had always been meant to be. That night, under the fading light of the city, we made a silent promise. Not the kind you shout to the world, but the kind you whisper between two steady hearts. A promise to keep choosing each other, even when life got hard. Because some loves aren't meant to be forgotten. They're meant to be found again, in the right time, in the right place, with the right hearts. And as he kissed me softly, the city humming around us, I knew this was our forever. If you were her, would you take him back after all those years? Do you believe love like this deserves a second chance? Tell me what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that stay with you long after they end.